Well, hey guys, as I've promised you, I'm here with Mike Kenney from Kenney and Company. And so I'm going to flash up his details on the screen here for you. So this is Mike, his cell phone, his office. And then I've actually put his email address up here. It's not on the page, but I've put it up here for you. It's Mike at kennyandcompany.com, where you can hit contact agent here. And so for those of you that, obviously missed in the last 5 seconds, you can pause it, rewind it. You can find Mike this way. But really excited to have Mike on. I've been telling you for a little while I'm going to have him on. And the reason I really like Mike more than anything, I mean, he's smart. He knows his stuff. I trust him. All those things are great. But the thing is, Mike has integrity, and a lot of people in this business, and I've been in real estate for a long time, they lack integrity. They're looking to make a buck. And for those of you that have ever worked with me, you know that I'm all about, you can trust what I say. And when I recommend someone, and I don't really recommend many people, you know that they're the real deal. And that's really why I wanted to have Mike on today, is to ask him a couple of questions, get his perspective. Just to be really upfront, his perspective may be different to mine. There's nothing wrong with that. I want you to have all the information, because ultimately you have to make the best decision for you. So Mike, thanks for coming on. Would you just share quickly a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into some questions that I know people want to hear about.
Yeah. Well, hi, Rudy. Thanks for having me on there. It's a blessing to be able to affiliate with guys of Rudy's quality and character. For each of you guys listening to this, I know you already know it, but Rudy's been a huge blessing, not just to me, but to many others. His work in all different facets are really genuinely a blessing. So we just actually had him in. He spoke to before he traveled to the other side of the world. And I spoke to our leadership team, and they're still talking weeks and months later after that about the nuggets that he shared. Very, very good stuff. So now, as Rudy said, Mike Kenney, I've been in real estate for just over 20 years, technically my whole life. It's third generation in real estate in the primarily Colorado Springs market. We service the entire Colorado area currently, and we know God's taken us into other parts of the country and globe, which we're excited about. In doing that, we've had the privilege to serve people in all walks of life, from tenants to first-time home buyers to investors buying their 15th, 20th. One guy just bought his 35th property with us. And so we love to serve people in any capacity we can. It's a privilege to be here and help you guys out in any way we can, speaking about what's going on.
That's awesome, Mike. And so you've got agents working in really all across Colorado, right? I mean, you're in Denver and in the Springs, Woodland Park. You cover the whole thing, and you've got how many people in your office?
I've got a fabulous team of about 50 people in total that are active, and we do cover the entire Front Range. We're in Summit County. We're just in Dillon over the weekend, again, for a different client. The market, we cover really all four corners. There's some place that we don't feel comfortable, we'll bring somebody else in, but we've had the experience over, like I said, the last about 3 generations. So to take care of just about any need that comes our way. So
that's awesome. And the thing that I really like about Mike, and those of you that have come to our real estate conferences or have watched other videos or whatever, the thing that I like about Mike is, it's one thing to be a realtor, and I've met a lot of realtors, but Mike is really a business owner and an entrepreneur who happens to be a realtor, other than the other way around. And the reason I like that is that in the current market, I believe that, really knowing how to create a deal is more important than just being able to sell a property. It seems like these days anyone can sell a property, but actually being able to create a deal is going to be super important, especially moving forward, if things do change. And having 50 different people working under Mike, the beauty of that is that he gets to keep his pulse on everything going on. It's not just, him himself helping with deals, but it's all the feedback and the different workshops and things that he does. Give him a good pulse on the market. And so really that's why I wanted Mike on, is to share a bit about what he's seeing. And so Mike, can you just share with us, I mean, obviously everybody that's in Colorado, most people watching this will be in Colorado, there's some in Texas and California, other places, but I mean, the market is obviously crazy. Everyone is buying everything all the time. What is your take on what's going on? It just seems like a crazy time right now in the market. Can you just share a bit about what you're seeing? And then really, what's your predictions for the next kind of 12 or 24 months?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. The market is very crazy. That's an understatement. In context, we complained a year ago about the lack of inventory, historic low inventories in the month of January. We'll just talk about it. In the month of January last year, there were just under 1,200 homes on the market. This is in Colorado Springs primarily. just under 1,200 homes. In 2021, in January, there were 460 homes on the market. I mean, just absolute craziness. So we have basic things going on of just supply issues. So that's the supply side of the equation. The demand side of it is Colorado continues to be one of the best places to live. According to U.S. News and World Report, we're in the top 5 slots. We have 4 of them in Colorado. So the place and desire for people to come here is there. There's no shortage. Beautiful setting. I actually just finished a development site. I could show you. You know, you're staring at stuff like this all day. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and seeing the opportunities that are out there. As far as the speed of the market, I mean, we're looking at stuff that is getting multiple offers in the first, hour that it's mentioned. We're having to actually slow down. So if you're selling a house, one of the biggest things we're doing is helping those sellers be positioned to know not only how do we get you top dollar for it, how are we going to see all the offers that you want to see on it, and walk you through that process. But really, if I'm selling, I need to know where I'm going. Am I buying something else? Am I moving out of state? What do we need to do? So structuring the deal, as you were talking about, is key to accomplish your goals. I mean, we sit down with everybody, we talk about three basic words kind of summarize our mission and purpose here, and it's grow, steward, and win. And that GROW acronym stands for goals, realities, options, and then kind of who, what, when, and where. And we start all those conversations with that. What is the goal that we're trying to accomplish? Sure, you want to sell your house. Okay, but you sell your house, then what? Well, I'm gonna go live in a van down by the river. Okay, that's fine. We can get you a really nice van with the prices that we're selling stuff for, if that's what the goal is. Or we're going to the mission field, or here's what we're trying to do. Or we want to sell the house, we want to buy 2 investment properties, or whatever the case is. We're going to lay out, here's the plan and strategy. But the speed of the market is such that you really want to have that plan figured out before you go in and just say, well, let's just try to sell it. Or let's just go try to buy it, because you'll run into frustrations and roadblocks and things that make that process a challenge if you don't really know there. So that's one of the things that we really value in helping people go through that basic, what are the goals? And we're going to help you figure out the realities. What can you afford? Can you get the house you're wanting to? Does that mean you get this one? Maybe it's best for you to stay in your current house. Maybe it's best to take some of the equity out of your current house and buy an investment property. You want to work on your retirement plan. Whatever the case is, we can look at all those scenarios and figure out, here's how it suits you best.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, I've done, I don't know, probably hundreds of real estate deals, over the years. And the thing that I've learned from working with most realtors, agents, whatever, is the most of the time they're focused on 2 things. I'm not saying it's true of everyone, but just generally focused on 2 things. Number one is, what can I get from you today? It's not about the client. It's about what can I, as the agent, get from you today, number one. And number 2, how can I get you to do it again and again and again, right? And the thing that I like about Mike is, if the best thing for you is to not move, he'll tell you that. Now, maybe you still want to move, and then he'll help you do that. But again, it's about integrity. It's about what's best for you as a person. And this is where having a bigger picture, so many agents I speak to, they know how to put a property up on Zillow, and that's kind of it, and then in times like this, the market does the rest and they look like geniuses. But it's not about that. It's about how do you take a whole of life view, like you just mentioned about retirement and what's next, because you might say, well, I'm going to do this, but what you don't realize is that the this is going to be really hard or difficult, or maybe you can't do that or you can't afford it, but you don't know that. And so many agents, what they'll do is they'll get you out of the house, but then you can't achieve the next thing because you didn't know that wasn't possible. And really what I like about Mike, and the reason I like working with Mike, is because he's not one of those people that's just after the deal. He's after really you and giving the best for you. And by doing that, the business comes, and so that's why I recommend him. And so it's going to sound like an advertisement for Mike, and that's perfectly fine. It's on purpose an advertisement for Mike because I think he's awesome.
Thank you,
but
Rudy.
really, it's an advertisement for you because you can work with people and hope for the best, or you can work with people that have your best interests at heart, because ultimately it still helps them. But the mindset is, how can I help you? Because that works for you in the back end. And the other thing about Mike is, obviously many of the people watching this, pretty much all the people watching this, are going to have a faith base. We're all in the same kind of community of believers. And that's what I love about Mike, is that you don't just have a conversation with him on a pure natural level. You can have a conversation with them on a spiritual level. What are you hearing? What are you hearing the Holy Spirit tell you? And those things are important, and there's very few people, because I've met so many people that are awesome on either the spiritual side, but couldn't do anything on the business side, or they're great business people, but no spiritual awareness whatsoever. Mike has a really good balance of those things. And so I feel comfortable with that. So Mike, as far as what's going on right now, I mean, obviously prices are crazy, inventory's low. where do you see things going in the next kind of 12 and 24 months? Like I've personally got some concerns about what's happening with tenancy laws. I even got an email today saying there's further changes, further bills. It seems like every week there's some other craziness about what the government's doing in Colorado, California, wherever. So it seems to me like there's a huge push kind of anti-landlord. And then at the same time, you've got all these moratoriums on lending and so on. So I've got some concerns around that space. What is your view on that? Where do you see the market going in the next 12 or 24 months? And how should someone be thinking about that?
Yeah, no, great question. Something we're definitely trying to keep our finger on the pulse of all the time. Specific to it, the demand to live somewhere is there, but we do see chaos, overreach regularly from regulatory pieces. Looking at Colorado, we still have moratoriums on foreclosures. We have moratoriums on evictions. El Paso County is unique right now. We are allowing evictions. They do have some restrictions there. But with that in totality, you still have to think of it in a general sense. People coming to the U.S. have to live somewhere, whether they're coming here legally or not. People who are here, we're not having, as despite the awful things that the enemy is trying to do to thwart life, people are still being born, and they're still growing, and we have more people year over year here. So as a simple supply and demand equation, there is a demand for space, there is a lack of supply of inventory, and those two things dictate what happens. So now I'm going to look at this question and say, if I'm investing in a property, is there a demand for that property? If I'm buying a property, do I have the ability to hold that property depending on what regulations may come in that scenario? When I first got started, I had a client who'd made a lot of money in real estate. And he told me, I said, so what's the secret? He said, you really want to know? I said, yeah, the secret in real estate. So I pull out my pen and paper and ready to go. It says the secret in real estate is to never have to buy and never have to sell. As long as you never have to do either, you'll always make money. And that simple statement has carried, and we've helped thousands of people utilizing the wisdom inside of that. It doesn't mean you don't buy, and it doesn't mean you don't sell. It's just meaning when you buy in such a way that you're not going to be in a position where you have to sell. So you don't take out a predatory loan. You're not looking at something with a balloon payment. If you're an investor, I'm going to speculate. Okay, I'm going to count on it going up the same 17% we just saw last year. So if I buy this and I take it out at 12%, interest only, and I'm going to get this here, and I'm going to get it here, I'm going to flip it, and we're going to get that 17%. I'm going to still get some money out of it. That's not wisdom, okay? Because the market will see some corrections. You'll see that. The demand side of things isn't going anywhere. Rents, while we just talked about how low inventory was on the sale side of it, it's still significantly more expensive per 100,000 to rent a property than it is to own one. It's cheaper to own than it is to rent. So in that scenario, and there's no shortage of demand for rentals. Right now, we have just as much at, to be frank, it was a not really exciting 3-bed, 2-bath house on a south that historically averaged $1,500 to $1,600 a month in rent. We're getting $2,200 a month in rent with somebody with a 780 FICO score, and they're here and they're signing a 2-year lease because that's the speed of what they have to do. So the rents are there, the demand is there, even with that. Now, what does that mean? You really have to be cautious about who am I putting into property. So the screening, the quality of who goes in there, because you put somebody who just lost their job, they're not going to be able to make payments. What are we going to get into in that? There are ways to still navigate, even with the chaos that's gone on over the last year and the world being subject to massive regulation and overreach based on fear. In that, with those pieces, and again, I'm speaking to it, but with those pieces, in that scenario for a tenant who was in the hospitality industry, for instance, a tough industry that took it as bad as anybody, we've had the ability to help them come up with a win-win for them and for the landlord. So with over 350 units that we're managing, I think we had a total of 2 people that had to get evicted in that scenario, which during a pandemic in there is historically low. Of that, the other options are helping people get out in a scenario where they win. It's rather than make it a negative to them. Look, we're gonna let you out of your lease. Maybe it's look, we're gonna give you some of your deposit back, even if you didn't deserve to get your deposit back so that you move out amicably, and we'll give you a chance and be able to give a honest but good reference as opposed to saying we evicted them. Excuse me. So there are times the market is there. We definitely need to be shrewd in that scenario and be alert as to what's going on. But the demand scenario is still here and the supply scenario is still low. So when you're looking at both of those, I don't have in the next 12 to 24 months, based on where interest rates are, we're still seeing money cheaper than we've ever seen, ever. Again, the last 2 years is we've talked about, oh, it's low, it's going to go up, it's going to go up. We saw last week it ticked up a little bit, but it's still 3%. You're talking about 30 years fixed interest at 3%. I mean, you're below inflation right now. Again, that's the big thing we're looking at is as the country prints more money and we look at those things, what used to be $1 cup of coffee becomes was a $5 cup of coffee last year. Reality is that's $1 cup of coffee. The same thing happens in rents. Part of those reasons they go up are, here's what happens. We look at minimum wages. They're talking about mandatory $15 an hour minimum wage. There's going to be impacts. Those costs get passed along all the way down. And so rents go up in that scenario. There's one of those pieces. Foreclosures, there'll be opportunities. I don't see this happening as abundantly in Colorado Springs. In fact, we're working with the bank right now, and they didn't want to take an offer beforehand because they want to take the property back and sell it at a increased value, which is different.
Yeah.
Before in the short sale, scenarios we were dealing with in 8 and 9, they were ready to get them off their books as quick as they could. It's not the same scenario right now.
So you're really seeing banks and other, organizations do things differently this time than what maybe we were used to or expected to see back in 08 and 09.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So where the banks are in this scenario, again, they're at a spot where they're taking offers, not in the same way. So before we would be able to go to the asset manager and say, look, I've got a guy that's willing to give you cash, get you out of this clean before you go through the entire foreclosure process. This sell to you in a short sale manner, and we're going to take this and work it out. We've got one right now. Plenty of margin, not that much in late fees and penalty. The bank says no, we want it back because we want to sell it. They said when we go through and do that, we'll let you sell it for us, but we want to go through that process. So it's one of those. It's a unique scenario. But they know there's more value and that they're seeing the appreciation. So it's something that's very different than what we saw after the crash in 8 and 9 and the years following of the banks dealing with their backlog inventory. They're actually wanting something they don't have it. They don't have it, which is unique. You don't typically want to take bad debts on as a general rule. It's your world. I can let you speak to that. But in that scenario of saying, why would you think it? Well, the reason their assets, they understand those assets are not depreciating, they're actually appreciating.
Yeah, so that's very different then, because like 08, 9, 10, a lot of banks had a lot of assets on their books and then they kind of dumped them all at the same time, which caused that massive spiral. And I know when I was, buying in Columbus, really kind of in 16 and 17, there was still a lot of, REOs, real estate owned, really bank owned properties. And now there, just none anywhere. There's no bank owned properties haven't been for the last really 2 years. And so that's a very fundamental shift that maybe people are not aware of. And I know for me personally, I was expecting the same sort of thing. So you're saying that what you're seeing is the banks have wised up to that and they're kind of slowly kind of wanting to release things so they don't flood the market. Do you think once the moratoriums and all that kind of come off, will their hand be forced at that point, do you think, or are they still going to try and do the slowly approach if they get a lot at one time?
Yeah, no, great question. I think the big thing to consider in that scenario is if they in fact get to foreclosure. So they may start the process this time around different than 8 and 9. So 06, you had the peak of the market crashes. Now they start the foreclosure. There's no equity inside of those homes. People can't get out of them if they want to. So they have to do a short sale or they lose the house. It was kind of either or scenario, or work out some deal with terms. With some investors take over the note, etc. There were options that came out of it. This time around, most people, even if they are in a scenario where the bank, they haven't been making their payments, their alternative this time around is they have equity. So they can still sell and get out of the house. They can sell it, they can pay their costs, they can pay any late fees and walk away. The difference this time around is even the banks, before we would negotiate on those late fees and we would get them to come down and give a discount to. Right now, the banks are not even wanting to deal with that because they know there's margin. They know there's margin in it. And they'd say, well, we just as well take the house back as we put it in that scenario. Now, it's still going to be case by case. There's still certain properties they're not going to want to take back, condition and other reasons for that. So there's opportunity to be had there, but it is a different piece. Will we see more of them? I do think you'll see some loosening and more opportunities come, but it's not really based on, I don't think we're going to see this such a flood of supply that the demand is going to outpace it, and we're going to, in order to keep up with it, such that the price is going to adjust downward like it did in 89. I don't see that this time around at all.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing to think about in terms of how the banks think about it, because the individuals are not what moves the market. It's a lot of property at one time flooding the market that creates that oversupply. So then really the last question then, Mike, and it's something that I do get from people right now is, market is top dollar. I mean, it's above top dollar. Financing is cheap. Can you talk about, if you're an owner occupant, is this a good time to buy? And if you're an investor, is this a good time to buy? And then ultimately, if you're a seller of either, because if you're a seller, it doesn't really matter, you're selling the property, whether to an investor or to an owner, can you touch on those three things? An owner occupant, what should they do? What should they be thinking about? An investor, what should they be thinking about? And if you're a seller, what should you be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of those pieces, when we go through that goal or that GROW acronym and talking about the goals, we want to think about when you're buying anything, what's the exit strategy? So when I'm coming into this property, I'm buying this property to hold it for the next 5, 10, 15 years? Is this, I want to be in it for 2 years and then I want to get out of it? All of those things make a difference in how you buy it, what price you should or shouldn't be willing to pay for it in those scenarios. So back to that holding cost, never having to buy, never having to sell. Here's the scenario we need to know. So we got to start with the end in mind. With that, for the first time home buyer or owner occupant, I'm going to look at this house. Why am I looking to move? Maybe it's my job. I don't need to be in a major metro area anymore. I'm going to go to, we're calling them Zoom towns right now. That's the piece. I can, I'm in Dillon or Breckenridge or, wherever the case is. I don't need to live downtown Denver. I can go buy a single family or a townhouse in Dillon, and I can, after my Zoom meetings like this, I can go jump on the slopes for the afternoon. There's some of those pieces you have to weigh out in that scenario. So when I'm doing this, why am I doing this? Is that first piece. But buying the first home, am I buying this home because I need more space? My family got bigger. My family got bigger here. I need more bedrooms functionally. I'm not going to have enough space in this house, so I will have to buy something later. Being forced to have to buy because now I don't fit here is another challenge. So in that scenario, as an owner occupant, okay, then if I'm going to buy as an owner occupant, what's the best price in this scenario? And this is something I think that's going to suffice for my family for the next 2 years. Is it going to suffice for my family for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever the scenario is? We have to start with that end. So knowing that, we can then design a plan specific to here's that goal. Is still in that scenario, being prepared, having to make sure you're pre-qualified with the quality lender is absolutely critical. If you haven't talked to a lender yet, we need to talk through that. We need to talk through what are the finances, where are we sitting? Are we in a position where we're going to be able to afford this? Depending on what's going on, obviously there's no definitive guarantee other than eternity on what the future holds. But how do we work through this in a way that is logical and makes sense for the investors right now? If I can look at, again, cheap money, depending on what that money was tied up. So we're having a guy right now who's doing 1031 exchange, sold a condo in Maui. He's bringing, about $700,000 in cash forward to do this. He's picking up, it's 2, maybe a third multi-unit property. He's getting them each in a scenario where he's putting 25% down on each of those. Those scenarios, they are cash flowing on them. Well, in each of those scenarios, in areas that are going to appreciate. And so what he did was he took what was a $700,000 asset net worth, and he's now going to multiply that into almost $2 million worth of real estate that he will have control over and see appreciation benefit in a position where he's not ever forced to sell it. He's in a place, cash flows there, rents are there. I like multi-unit from the investment standpoint because it gives some diversification typically lose all the tenants at once as the house burns down or something, some other tragic event. That's what insurance is for, to cover in those scenarios. But there's ways to be positioned so you can be successful. And right now, there still is a great time. If you're buying investment property, as long as you buy the right. So there's, again, it really is critical. Not just anything is right. Again, it's got to be specific. What's the goal that you're trying to accomplish? What are the realities of that property? What location is it? Are people going to want to be here in the future? Is this something that no one's ever going to move to? Yeah, it's a great price, but it's a great price because no one's ever going to come to it. So there's things you got to look at. I had a guy ask me about a cabin in the middle of nowhere. I won't say which town. Anyways, itty bitty town, didn't have running water. They had to have cistern, water brought in, had a septic tank, had that propane brought in. The guy's like, "No, I want to be in the mountains. I'm going to retreat." I said, "Are you comfortable being here year round all the time?" Because it's based on his income and job scenario. He said, "Well, yeah, I think so." I said, "We realize you're not going to get out here when the snow falls because you're so high up. These roads are not serviced. Here's what you're looking at. You can go by that if you want to, but the reason this little cabin is $100,000 with the 3 acres around it is nobody goes, and it's not really got a high demand. I mean, with all the other stuff going on around us, we go 15 minutes this direction, and that same cabin would go for $250,000 with those same lack of amenities. So you need to understand, here's where we're at. So getting to that question of what's the goal, just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's good. And in there, so we got to make sure they all fit in line with each other.
And I think that's one of the challenges for people in this market that have missed out, that feel like, I have to buy something because the prices are going to keep rising. That's where, again, I keep telling people like, hey, you've got to know who you're working with, because if you've got someone that just is looking to make a quick buck off you, everything's a good deal, versus someone that wants a long-term relationship and really ultimately is about integrity, because they're going to tell you buy that thing. And then when the snow comes, you realize why nobody else bought it. And so it's so important to have that balance, I just find that people get so caught up in missing out, then they make a bad decision and then they're stuck. And so you want to really know what you're buying, and more importantly, why you're buying, which I think what you do as a process is so important. And so then really in closing, Mike, for people that are selling at the moment, I mean, what do they do? Because the prices are crazy. I mean, some people may be worried about selling and then not being able to, obviously get back into the market. But then also for other people, it's like they want to sell. What's the best way to get top dollar? How are you approaching that piece?
Yeah, no, great question. Minimally, when we go through this process with the seller, we're looking at, like I said, what are their goals? We're then looking at how can we best position this in the market. Some people say, well, I don't have to do anything to my house. It's, the carpet stinks and the walls have holes in them, and somebody's still going to buy it, right? They will, probably, based on the chaos in the market. But if your goal is to get to this, if you spend the $3,000 on some fresh paint and another $5,000 on some fresh carpet, that $8,000 is not $8,000 per dollar. That's 2 or 3 times that, because now you're going to have a lot more people ready to walk in the door and buy it. So knowing what that is, sometimes it doesn't make sense to spend the money on it based on the price point. And it's look, here's what we need to do. We want to price it strategically so we get as many buyers there. At the end of the day, that's still the goal. So being strategic, getting it on the market, having it properly evaluated, staged, presented, all those things still pay dividends today. Where people say, well, I don't have to do anything. I can just sell it. Sure, you can sell it, but you won't sell it for top dollar. And again, that second word I shared, that's part of our ethos of stewardship. When we've been entrusted with something, how well are we stewarding that resource? And how do we help that become as much as it's possible that it can become? So positioning it correctly is still key. Having that done and understood what's the market, pricing it so that we get as many buyers in there as possible at one time. And you get bidding wars. We just had one that was 41 different offers on it. This is not a $300,000 house. This was $1.5 million house. 31 different offers, people coming in and running the price up because it was marketed well, it was positioned correctly. And again, because we got a lot of buzz in a single week.
Sorry, Mike, your mic just went muted for some reason.
Did I lose you?
Yeah, your mic just went muted.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Rudy. Say that one more time.
Sorry, your mic just went muted for a second. So You just got, you positioned it well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You heard I got positioned well. Yeah. So positioning the property well in the marketplace so that as many people can possibly see it is absolutely critical. Getting as many buyers there at any single time. And then there's a feeding frenzy that takes place in that scenario of I want to win. Because market value, people say, what's my house worth? Well, it's what a ready, willing buyer is willing to pay for it and what you're willing to sell it for. That's market value at the end of the day. The more buyers I have that say I want it, the higher the market value is. And that's a regular piece. We have to deal with that when we deal with appraisers. We're working through that scenario. I just had an appraiser come up $200,000 on a property because of the level of bids that we got to. He's like, no, there's no other comps. Like, well, I've got 15 people here that say it's worth this price. So do you believe that that's the case? And now when you put your comp in here, we look through these numbers and show them here's what the market's appreciated at just over the last, the last month since your last comp you gave me. Here's that 8% appreciation you said you couldn't find. Well, here it is. And he got to it and said, yeah, okay, I can do it. And the bank accepted it with no objections on behalf of the seller. So it's a win scenario. But getting it there in front of as many people as possible is a key.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you have to realize one of the other reasons why I recommend Mike is, not just the experience and all that, but I mean, he's got 50 brokers working for him across the state, which means that if it comes to selling a property, he can get it in front of a lot more eyeballs than maybe like a smaller company can. Number one. Number two, there's just that mass of people that can help when things, get challenged. Appraisals can be difficult. And I've had issues with appraisals in the past. Buying property because the banks just naturally want to be conservative. It's just good for them to be conservative at times. So you need someone that can push it, but not just push it artificially, but push it from a standpoint of being able to say, here is the reason why. And then on the flip side of that, the same way that a really good agent can create demand for a property, he also, or she, these days, he or she knows how to also create an opportunity for you to buy that property for a reasonable price or hopefully under market, because they can play the other side of that. So, this is where the business context comes in, because it's one thing to just purely list a property or buy a property. But when you understand the full spectrum that Mike's talking about, that stuff is really useful. And I know for many of you, I started out doing real estate. And so obviously many of you know me from the real estate stuff that I've done, I know the people that know what they're talking about. There is a big difference. And I can just tell you the Mike is someone that I would feel confident in recommending to others. So that's why I wanted to have him on. So if you've got any questions about what Mike has shared or you want to know more, obviously contact Mike or send me an email. I'll be happy to pass those on and connect you. But really, I want to connect. My goal, as always, is connect good people together, people that I trust, that have integrity, that have a good faith belief like we do, so that you can talk to people on a natural but also a spiritual level and make sure that we do the best that we can do to build a kingdom. So, Mike, thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy, but we really appreciate it. And, guys, really encourage you to reach out to Mike. I'll pop up his details again here on the screen. So again, it's Mike Kenney at Kenney and Company. You can see his email up here. I've just highlighted it. His phone number is there for office and cell phone. And then you can obviously contact Mike through the web form. You just hit contact agent, and really it's just Kenney and Company. I'll go to the main page here so that you can see it. It's kennyandcompany.com. And I highly encourage you to get in touch with Mike. He really is that good. And Mike, again, thanks for taking the time, man. It's good to see you. And hopefully we can have you on again in the future and just share more of your wisdom with everyone and really just help us as we're navigating the wealth building side of things. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks.
Good to be with you always. Talk soon.
Yeah.
God bless.